One of the arguments against bombing the rail lines is that it would have been ineffective. The train tracks were easily and quickly repaired. The counter-argument is that while rail tracks could have been easily rebuilt, bridges, viaducts, and tunnels could not have been.
Repairing rail lines, not a very long process. I guess usually a day or two. Repairing bridges was substantially longer, and bridges in remote areas even more difficult.
The 321st Bombardment Group had been trained specifically to do precision bombing on very small targets. But these targets were very significant, be it bridges, be it special cantonments.
There were actually 5 lines or routes for transporting Hungarian Jews to the killing center. The main line was called the Prešov-Kosice line. There was a crucial bridge on that line, which, if it could be bombed, would stall traffic going to Auschwitz for an unlimited time, as long as that bridge could be held out of operation.
By early 1944, military planners in the Mediterranean theater of operations understood that bridge busting was the most effective method of rail interdiction. Requests for bombing rail approaches to Auschwitz included specific mention of bridges along those lines known to be used for deportations. The requests went unheeded. Attacking the killing facilities directly was the other military option available to the Allies. What were the operational constraints to destroying the gas chambers and crematoria, and could they be overcome? One of the obstacles was enemy air defenses, which consisted mainly of anti-aircraft guns, smoke screens, and fighter planes. But by the middle of 1944, the German Air Force had been so weakened, it was forced to carefully pick and choose its battles. And on those occasions, when they elected to fight, the Luftwaffe faced Allied air forces that were qualitatively and quantitatively superior.
In the Mediterranean theater, by the summer of 1944, air-to-air or aerial opposition is virtually nil.
The enemy aircraft had dwindled down considerably.
Most of the enemy aircraft were unavailable or not around because the Germans had a fuel shortage. We did have one attack on our group of about 20 aircraft, in which we lost 4 aircraft in May of '44. But after that, outside of one mission to Vienna, we saw very few enemy aircraft.
The Germans had concentrated most of their fighter defenses in Germany itself.
In fact, Allied bombers striking at the oil plant at Auschwitz on August 20th and September 13th encountered only token fighter resistance. On the August 20th raid, Allied planes faced 79 heavy anti-aircraft guns, 50 of which had only recently been deployed, yet they lost only 1 bomber out of 127 aircraft. On the September 13th mission, only 3 planes were lost out of 96 bombers. In both cases, the loss rate was below the average for the 15th Air Force. Another defense against bombers was smoke screens.
If the Germans have enough advance warning, the Germans know where the target is, and if they have smoke projectors, the target may well be covered in smoke, even if it's a clear day, which will be a technical problem for bombing accuracy.
Here, for example, German smoke pots obscure the oil plant at Auschwitz. However, in the aerial photographs of Birkenau taken during the August 20th and September 13th bombing missions, there were no operating smoke pots defending the death camp, and the smoke screens for the nearby oil plant did not affect Birkenau at all. This clear visibility is evident in one of the more remarkable combat photographs of World War II. On the September 13th mission to Auschwitz, Allied bombs are seen here directly over the crematoria as they drop toward the target. Not Birkenau, but the Farben oil plant 5 miles away.
When these bombers started, of course the first idea that people had was let them hit the crematoria. Let them stop what was going on. Let them stop the burnings.
Suddenly we looked up. We saw the sky the entire sky was like a big mirror. And the mirrors, the whole world lit up, you know.
We saw the planes flying over all the time. They were making a lot of racket then.
We heard bombs falling. The earth was shaking. And it didn't matter, it was music to our ears.
And we were all jumping up with our hands and happy and trying to see if they can see us, that here we are, please help us.
And we didn't even give a thought that this could get right on our head. We were just right on.
From successful Allied bombing missions in southern Poland and elsewhere, it is apparent that German defenses, while formidable, were hardly insurmountable. Critics of the bombing of Auschwitz have argued that any high-altitude air attack would have killed many prisoners. Even so, Jewish leaders argued that in reality they were slated to be killed anyway. Could the 4 large crematoria have been destroyed with minimal collateral damage to nearby barracks? That was another question that faced Allied Air Command. The answer can be found by examining a mission comparable to the one at Birkenau. An apt model for such a raid was the August 24, 1944 attack on a group of factories adjacent to the Buchenwald concentration camp near Weimar, Germany.
I was the aircraft commander of the 401st Group during that mission, and it was a very successful mission. And as you know, the concentration camps were right next to the factory, and they weren't touched. It was very, very accurate bombing.
In order to avoid hitting the concentration camp and killing inmates, air crews were briefed to bomb only under optimal conditions.
The briefing on the Weimar mission, that the intelligence officer stressed that there were presumed to be a concentration camp next to the factory, and that we were to make every effort for precision bombing right on the target and in the confines of the target only.
We can see the first groups of bombs dropped from 24,000 feet score direct hits on the factory area.
First photograph, you see the bombs falling, and then more bombs hitting right after that.
With above-average accuracy, 4 bombardment groups from the U.S. 8th Air Force successfully destroyed the targeted V-weapons factories with virtually no damage to the adjacent barracks in the concentration camp. The high accuracy of the raid is confirmed here by a photo interpreter. 384 inmates who were working in the factory were killed in the raid because the Germans prevented them from taking refuge in the camp. After liberation, survivors confirmed that Allied pilots tried their best to avoid hitting the camp.
During these air raids, the Nazis, the Germans, used to come inside the camp because the camp, inside of the camp, was untouched. There was not a single bomb that fell inside the camp.
Despite the possibility of killing thousands of nearby innocent inmates, Air Force commanders were confident that they could destroy this factory in the heart of Germany and willingly risk doing so.
They come in on a V-weapons plant outside of Buchenwald. It has to be hit for political reasons.
You can make the argument that it was a waste of time and resources to concentrate on stopping the V-1 and V-2 rockets and jets from flying against England.
Spots violently protests as much as he can, as long as he can, about having to bomb V-weapons, which are a diversion of force from the main strategic effort. V-weapon components are a very high political target with the British government. What it illustrates is that if they have to bomb a political target, they will do it if they're ordered to, despite whatever the risk to the surrounding territory.
There is no evidence to suggest they could not have done the same at Birkenau.
It's a question of what you feel really strongly about. And if people had felt very strongly about destroying the death camps, then I think that could have been managed.
In terms of accuracy in bombing, again, the crematoriums, yes, you could do it with B-17s from 25,000 feet on a clear day.
There's no question that they had the capability to bomb Birkenau.
The 4 crematoria at Birkenau, as was the case with the Buchenwald factories, were built adjacent to nearby barracks. Projected bomb patterns indicate that most bombs would have fallen away from the barracks area. To mitigate the possibility of collateral damage, operational planners could have utilized B-25 medium bombers, which were more accurate. Although bombing from lower altitudes would appear to put them at greater risk from anti-aircraft guns, their maneuverability and shorter bomb runs made them harder to hit. The accuracy of medium bombardment was illustrated in the August 18, 1944 attack on Toulon Harbor, a raid that shares some similarities with a hypothetical raid on Birkenau.
The invasion of southern France took place on August 15th, 1944.
The 321st was called upon to take out the battleship Strasbourg and the cruiser La Garçonnière.
36 B-25s from the 321st Bombardment Group were assigned to destroy 4 narrow-profile targets.
This required precise bombing, and we conducted the raid, even though the target was heavily defended and we encountered a lot of flak.
It was ringed by, the best knowledge I have, is 82 anti-aircraft guns around the Toulon Harbor.
Despite the extremely intense flak on the bomb run, the bombers achieved direct hits on their targets. They sank the submarine, the battleship was gutted by fires and completely disabled, and the cruiser keeled over on its side. The destroyer had departed prior to the attack.
We were very, very fortunate we didn't lose a single airplane or person.
The Toulon Harbor raid represents a model for the destruction of the 4 crematoria at Birkenau.
There's no doubt in my mind that the B-25s could have bombed the killing complexes.
The 4 buildings placed approximately each 2 to about 350 yards apart, and then separated by about another quarter of a mile for the other 2 buildings.
Now, I'm not saying that we wouldn't have some collateral damage, because keep in mind there's barracks very close to the killing complexes.
3 planes per building, you stand a good chance of destroying the building and not straying away so you'd have collateral damage.
To me, yes, I think that the B-25 could have been used and would have been effective.
Fighter bombers such as the P-38 were also an option. A comparative scenario for a potential bombing mission on Birkenau was the June 10, 1944 low-level P-38 raid on the Ploiești oil refineries in Romania. The distance was almost the same, about 1,250 miles round trip.
One of our longest missions of dive bombing was to dive bomb the Americano-Romano refinery in the Ploiești, Romania area. The heavy bombers had been trying to knock it out for some time, but they put up a smoke screen. They had plenty of time to do it because the bombers took several hours to get there.
Ploiești has the thickest smoke screen in Europe, and they can't bomb accurately through smoke.
We decided to take P-38s, put a 1,000-pound bomb under one wing and a 310-gallon tank under the other wing. We'd go on over to the area on the deck all the way. When we get to the target, we pull up to about 6,000 to 8,000 feet and roll in on our dive bombing attack.
The aiming points were also distinct targets within a larger complex.
If we didn't have good pictures of what the refinery looked like, and which building was a cracking plant, and which building was an evaporation plant, and so on, we had to know that and be able to recognize it immediately. So our reconnaissance people did a terrific job in getting that kind of information.
Ploiești was the 3rd most defended target in Europe, just behind Berlin and Vienna. Yet P-38s of the 82nd Fighter Group were able to penetrate to the target and hit their objectives.
And when I looked down to see the target area, which I was right over, due to the fact that I'd seen these pictures before, I could see exactly my target I was going after. And it was a big building there with 4 smokestacks on each corner.
Unlike Ploiești, Birkenau was quite vulnerable to a low-level attack. The camp had no light or medium anti-aircraft guns or smoke screens. If these well-trained and experienced fighter pilots could successfully attack Ploiești, could they not also have attacked Birkenau?
The esprit de corps that we would have to save those people from being wiped out the way they're wiping them out every one of us would want to go in there and risk our life to save those people. And I think we could do it.
The death camp, had it been considered as a potential target, compared favorably with targets that were successfully bombed during the war. That being the case, the more important question is, should the Allies have sent planes to bomb the death camp? The answer to this lies not in any military feasibility assessment that the Allies never made, but rather in some determination of what constituted target priority.
Spaatz and Eisenhower, yes, they had the authority to bomb any target in Europe, but we have to put them into context. Spaatz and Eisenhower are not going to order a bombing with obvious political ramifications and diplomatic ramifications without checking, without going up the line and saying, we plan on bombing this, is this okay?
The scope of the war was so enormous, and no matter how large, the resources used against Birkenau would have been insignificant compared to the entire scope of the war.
Less than 1% of their total effort would have been devoted to bombing Auschwitz. I mean, a very tiny percentage. In the great scheme of things, 1/3 of 1% shouldn't make any difference.
Was it incompetence, indifference, indecision, disbelief, anti-Semitism? All of these point to reasons that had more to do with the Allied mindset than its military capability.
The Jewish issue was for them number 6 or 8 on the hit parade. It wasn't at the top of their agenda.
When the people in the War Department realized that they were expected to participate in some way in the question of rescue, there was a strong negative feeling.
I don't believe that in the highest levels of the American government or in the Army Air Forces there was deep enough concern with that particular issue.
The OPD simply looked at what's our policy on rescue. The answer when they look in the file is no, we don't participate in rescue, so they negative the request.
The Allies had their agenda, and we were not a part of that.
Take these strategic bombers and bomb something non-strategic with them, it's going to be resisted because it's a precedent. If we can be ordered to take bombers and bomb this thing, who knows, what they're going to tell us, to divert bombers for the next thing.
But I do believe that people were telling the truth when they said that they were mainly concerned with ending the war as quickly as possible. But I think they could also have focused on the issues of the death camps if they had been deeply concerned about saving the people in those death camps, and it didn't seem to occur to them.
Some military historians, however, taking their cue from official statements made during the war, make a simpler case. A death camp was not a strategic target and therefore was a diversion from the war effort. They claim political and military leaders were not callous or heartless, but rather were determined to focus their air power strictly on winning the war. In the majority, this was true, but there were exceptions.
The Warsaw airdrop of fall 1944 is a significant example of when military power was diverted for political reasons during World War II.
Allied leaders knew full well that these supplies could not stop the Nazi siege of Warsaw, yet remained resolute in ordering these futile missions. In a humanitarian gesture, the British government ordered a famine relief flight in April 1944 to save 15,000 starving nomadic Bedouin in southern Arabia. The task force consisted of 6 Wellington bombers with full air and ground crews. These aircraft were pulled from England just 6 weeks before D-Day. Why couldn't a similar humanitarian effort have been made to destroy the Birkenau gas chambers, which were killing over 10,000 people a day?
In the United States War Department during the Second World War, there was a Secretary of War, Stimson, and an Assistant Secretary of War, John McCloy, who had a great concern for what they called the artifacts, or what people call the artifacts of civilization.
In August 1943, partially because of requests from influential individuals and institutions, the Roberts Commission was formed by an executive order of President Roosevelt. Its mission, in part, was to help preserve cultural, historic, and religious buildings of Western civilization from Allied bombing campaigns in Italy and Germany. With help from the Air Force, which was readily forthcoming, the Commission was able to save many important buildings from destruction.
In the 15th Air Force, there were a lot of cultural and religious places that they very carefully avoided hitting.
We were constrained because of so many historical buildings. We were told specifically to make sure not to hit them.
The United States prepared an atlas of sites in Italy that were to be, if possible, spared from bombing.
McCloy himself arranged for the non-bombing of the German city of Rothenburg, which was also on the target lists because of the splendid medieval architecture there.
It's an odd paradox that there were people in very high positions who appear in some ways to have been more concerned with saving art objects and other artifacts of civilization or cultural monuments than they were in saving the lives of human beings.
The destruction of the killing facilities might have appreciably slowed the systematic slaughter. The 4 large crematoria took 8 months to build at the height of Nazi power. Rebuilding them in the last year of the war would have been nearly impossible.
A successful bombing would have slowed down the killing operations, would have made them less efficient.
In retrospect, there is no one answer to explain how could it be that the governments of the 2 great Western democracies knew that a place existed where 10,000 helpless human beings were being killed every day. Knew that such killings actually occurred over and over again, and yet within their effort to win the war, did not feel compelled to try and stop it.
The Allies could have done a great deal more to let the Germans know that they knew what they were doing to us.
At that time, the Germans were burning 10,000 men, women, and children every day, every night. That hurts.
So if the Allies bomb Auschwitz, this sends a statement to the Germans: we know what you're doing, we don't like it, stop it.
It wouldn't have taken away from the war effort, you know. Although you'll hear people say that it would take away from the war efforts. Those are phony baloney excuses, you know.
One has to wonder why there couldn't have been the slightest little diversion.
There's no voice for the Jews in Allied headquarters. There's very little voice, in Allied politics, not as much.
You see, I think that we would have felt that somebody did care if they bombed.
It's a sad but true fact that the Allied militaries in World War II there were not very many high-ranking Jewish officers in the Allied militaries. And if there were, they were normally inclined to assimilate. They were normally inclined not to speak out and emphasize their Jewishness.
Why? Because the Jewish community was terrified of homegrown anti-Semitism.
I can't find that voice in the Allied halls of power speaking out for bombing Auschwitz, speaking out insistently and speaking out that this must be done.
I think the evidence indicates that the policy and the mentality were flawed.
When will they try to liberate us, to destroy the Germans, to destroy the camps? But it didn't happen. It didn't happen.
Nobody came. Nobody came.